Hello everyone, I'm Andrea from Andrea Flipping Unique. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thanks for joining. I have been nonstop the last couple of months working on customer pieces, and I finally got caught up, so I was able to pull something out of my own inventory and start working on that. I found this single Dixie mid-century modern nightstand on Facebook Marketplace for $15, and although single nightstands are a little bit more difficult to sell, my love for mid-century modern furniture is just too big, and I couldn't say no to this one. Overall, it was in pretty good condition. It just had a few scratches and some broken veneer, and the bottom plate around this handle was missing. The inside of the drawers also smelled a little bit musty, so don't be alarmed, that's just baking soda. I wasn't having a party in my garage. So if you want to see how I fix all these issues and bring this nightstand back to life, then continue watching. First things first, I had to start cleaning this because it was sitting in my garage for a couple of months and it got pretty dusty. I also took the time to assess any damage, and everything still looked pretty good. The only issue that I really had was the top was laminate, so I decided that I was going to veneer it. There were a couple of missing chunks of veneer on the side and on the drawer, and like I said previously, that little wooden plate on the front drawer was also missing. All of the drawers still worked good. I had no broken drawer slides, and I had all of the original legs, so that was a plus. After cleaning, I did start to remove the finish with my carbide scraper, but I realized my blade was pretty dull and it needed to be sharpened, so I figured it was a perfect opportunity to show you how I do that. I start off by removing the blade from the handle and wiping it off, and then I grab my diamond stone sharpener, and the one that I'm using is 600 grit. I then take a little bit of lapping fluid and pour it onto the stone itself, and this allows for a more smoother, controlled sharpening and also helps suspend the metal shavings so that they don't get stuck to the stone. I then take my blade, put it onto the stone, and press down firmly and move it in circular motions. I also press down on each side and do the same circular motion so that the whole thing gets sharpened. I do this for about a minute or two, and then I wipe off any excess lapping fluid that's left on the blade and attach it back to my handle. It's a little hard to tell, but your lapping fluid will turn black, and that's perfectly normal. It's just the metal shavings from the sharpening. I've had this carbide sharpener for about 2 years now, and this is the original blade that it came with. So if you're looking to save a little bit of money, I would definitely sharpen your blades instead of buying new ones. I'll also have everything that I used linked down below in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. After my blade was good and sharpened, I got right back into removing the finish. I don't know about you, but there is nothing that I love more than when my carbide scraper removes that finish and the finish just turns into dust, and that is exactly what this one did. It definitely makes this process go by so much faster when that happens. But with that being said, please make sure when you're doing this that you do wear a mask, because this dust can go up into the air and you don't want to be breathing that in. After removing as much of the finish that I could, I then took my orbital sander and 120 grit sandpaper to remove the rest. I also ended up doing a little bit of hand sanding on the trim as well as the finger pulls on the drawers. Proceed with caution if you choose to do this, but I find the most efficient way to sand legs like these for myself is to flip my sander upside down and put it between my knees. I have tried a few other methods, including attaching the leg to a drill and then sanding it that way with sandpaper wrapped around it, but the bottom of my hand ended up getting burned from the friction. I also tried to do it normally with my sander in one hand and the leg in the other, but because my carpal tunnel is so bad, it just ends up hurting my wrist. After I finished my first round of sanding, I did notice some dents and scratches in the veneer, so I used a damp cloth in my iron to try to steam them out. After I got as many dents and scratches out that I could, I went back in with my orbital sander with 150 grit sandpaper and then 180 grit sandpaper to finish sanding. I did have a few areas where the veneer was broken off, so I used some epoxy wood putty to fill those in. After the wood putty had cured, I sanded it all down so that it was flush with the veneer. I had been using this nightstand to mix paint and top coat on, so some of it spilled and I needed to sand it off before I put my veneer on it. If you're unsure if you have a laminate piece or not, go ahead and sand it, and if it starts to turn this hazy white color, it's definitely laminate. This is actually the resin turning into really fine dust, so make sure that you're wearing a mask when doing this because you do not want to be breathing this stuff in. I then measured my piece of veneer that I was going to be attaching to the top. When you are measuring out your veneer, make sure that you're measuring to have a little bit of overhang on all sides. I like to have between a ½ inch to an inch, just depending on how large of a surface I'm working with, but it's going to allow you to have a little bit of wiggle room in case you do misalign your veneer when placing it. After your veneer is cut out, you're then going to want to apply your adhesive. There are a few different methods that you can use to do this, but I personally like to use contact cement. This stuff is very sticky and it smells really bad, so make sure that you're wearing gloves and a respirator. You need to apply a thin layer of cement to both the veneer and the substrate, and I like to do that using a chip brush. I like to move my brush in all directions so that I know that all areas are being covered. When the glue is dry, it's going to have a dull shine to it, and it's going to take about 10 to 15 minutes depending on the climate that you live in. At this point, you can attach the two pieces together. However, I do like to do 2 coats of cement on mine so that I know every inch is covered. This stuff only works if both the veneer and the substrate have the cement on it, so if there is an area that does not have glue, it will not stick together. After the cement has properly dried, you're going to want to put dowels or sticks down onto your substrate. This is going to keep the veneer from sticking to the substrate so that you can line it up properly. The thing about contact cement is once the two pieces stick together, they are stuck, and it's almost nearly impossible to get the veneer off without ruining it. Once the veneer is lined up, you can go ahead and remove the first stick and start to press it down. The key to doing this properly is to make sure that you're using good pressure to attach the two pieces together. You can do this in several different ways. Right now, I'm using a piece of wood that's wrapped in a microfiber cloth. I actually ended up switching to this little squeegee that has felt on it, and this worked a lot better. As you get a section down, you can start moving your dowels up and then doing the next one until the whole entire thing has been placed. You want to make sure that you don't have any air bubbles showing, and if you think you've pressed down enough, press down a little bit more. After I get it attached, I go back in with my X-Acto knife and trim off all of the excess. After it's trimmed off, I'll go back in with some sandpaper and sand off all of the rough edges. When I was removing the finish off of the old edge banding, a lot of it started to break off, so I decided to remove it completely and add new pieces. I start out by measuring the size strip that I need, and I do like to have a little bit of overhang on either side so that I can sand it flush. These do come in different widths, so you can get the exact size that you need, but this is just what I had on hand, so I ended up having to cut mine in half. Once you have your piece cut, you're going to want to line it up and then take an iron and start melting the glue. I like to work in sections and press the edge banding down as I go, but just be careful because it does get a little bit hot. After it's glued on, I'll go back in and trim off any excess and sand it down smooth. The next thing I had to do was make a new wood plate for the handle, and to do so I needed the other one. So I removed it using my painter's tool and a hammer. I have seen people make these by making a mold of one of them and then using wood epoxy putty to fill the mold in, but I wanted mine to be made out of real wood. So I ended up going to my local hobby store and I found a piece of basswood that was 3/32 of an inch, which is the exact width that I needed. I was going to be cutting this on my bandsaw, and basswood is pretty soft and I didn't want to risk having a lot of tear out, so I did put a piece of painter's tape over the spot that I was going to be cutting. I then took the original piece and placed it on the painter's tape and traced both the outside and the inside. I then cut just the outside on my bandsaw. After I had the outside cut, I then went back and took my X-Acto knife and cut a slit at the bottom of the plate. I know I could have easily done this on my bandsaw, but I didn't want there to be such a huge gap that I would have had to fill it in with wood putty. After I made that slit, I then went in with my drill and drilled out a few holes so that I could get the whole thing around my saw blade and cut out the middle. After cutting it on my bandsaw, it was still a little bit off from the original one, so I actually ended up gluing the two together and using my Dremel tool to sand down the rest. After I had all the edges sanded to where I liked them, I then took a little bit of super glue and glued back together that slit I made. The original wood plate had veneer on it, and I wanted this one to match as closely as I could get it, so I ended up using the same edge banding that I used on the nightstand and attached it to this. After it was ironed on, I then trimmed off and sanded all of the excess. After I got the wood plate all made, it was time to move on to staining. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I love using the We Refinish wiping stains. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to try out a few new products that they're coming out with. So instead of having the pre-mixed stains, they're coming out with stain tint concentrates that you can mix into their stain base and make it as light or as dark as you would like. And they will still be able to go into all of your favorite water-based products, so you can also make your own toners with them as well. For the stain that I made, I chose to mix a couple together, and I chose Royal Walnut, which is one of my favorite colors, and a new color they're coming out with called Butterscotch. To make it, I did 5 pumps of each colorant into 8 ounces of their clear liquid stain base. I know this cup only has 4 ounces in it right now, but I didn't want to spill it when I was mixing it, but I did add the additional 4 ounces after. And then I just applied it the same way as I would with any of their stains. On all of the veneer, I ended up doing 1 coat of stain, but on the legs and the solid wood trim on the front, I ended up doing 2 coats. After the stain had dried, I did a couple of coats of Behr's water-based polyurethane and semi-gloss. I did use a paintbrush to get into this finger pull area, as well as some of the trim on the front of the nightstand, and then I rolled on everything else with a foam roller. Between coats, I did lightly sand with 400 grit sandpaper. After the top coat was dry, I went in and started color matching all of the veneer that I repaired. I still needed to do some toning on this piece because all of the woods were different and they were still a little bit off in color. Instead of making my own toner with the stains like I normally do, I did get to try this new product called Wipe On Aqua Poly, and it's a toner top coat also from We Refinish. This is a water-based product and you wipe it on like you would with regular Wipe On Poly, and it has a slight tinge of color to it. I used the brown mahogany on this front trim piece, the legs, and the edge banding and veneer that I had put on. For all of the original veneer that was on this nightstand, I did use the dark walnut. You can just wipe these on with a cloth, and I will show you in a couple of minutes, but I did use a paintbrush to apply it on this front trim piece because I didn't want to accidentally get it on the other veneer. On the front trim piece and the legs, I did end up doing 4 coats of this, and on everything else, I just did 1. To wipe it on, I just used a regular lint-free staining pad. Overall, I will say that I really enjoyed working with this product. I definitely will be using it again. However, I will try to do it either at night or in the early morning because it was pretty hot when I applied this and it did dry pretty quickly. The other thing about this product is it does come in a satin finish, and because I used semi-gloss originally, I did apply a couple of more coats of my top coat after this had dried. So unfortunately, when I was taking out the other drawer liners, it did rip up some of the veneer that was in the bottom, and I ended up having to tear it all out and sand it down and add new drawer liners. As I started to take them out, I had said to myself, you really should be using a heat gun to do this, and I didn't listen to myself, and that's what happened. So from here on out, if I have drawer liners that are in my pieces that need to come out, I will be using my heat gun. I also did attach those wood plates back onto the front drawers. Unfortunately, I did forget to film it, but I used wood glue to attach them. And the last thing I did was use the Arlington Woodworks Wood Balm to rehydrate all of my drawers and the drawer slides. Now, before I show you what the nightstand looks like now, I wanted to remind you of how sad and lonely it looked like before. And if you want to see more furniture flips, restorations, and the occasional DIY, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And here is what it looks like now. I absolutely love how this piece turned out, and I am so proud of it. I love the stain color that I created for it. I love that all of the woods are very cohesive, and I'm really proud of that wood plate that I built. It's not an exact replica, but I think it's pretty close. One of the goals that I had set for myself at the beginning of the year was to really challenge myself with my veneer repairs and trying to fix things as opposed to just saying it's not fixable and painting it. Now, don't get me wrong though, I still love painting furniture, and I still will continue to paint furniture. But if I can fix something and bring it back to its original glory, I will try to do that. So like always, thank you for spending some time with me. Let me know what you think in the comments. Just be respectful, and I will talk to y'all soon.